Hello, my friends. Welcome to my very first live stream. I'm very excited. I'm excited to have you with me. So, if you're joining me live, please say hello, say where you're from, and I'd like to see some encouragement from you all. So, looking by what I showed in the intro, so you pretty much know who my guest is. So, without further ado, let us welcome my best friend and career bestie, Jennifer Blake. Hey there.
Hey, how's it going?
Going good. How is it for you?
Good. Oh my gosh, the chat is already being lit up right now.
Yes, let me just pull up the chat very quick. And
Yeah.
I see some very good familiar faces. Joe, my one other good friend, my coach, and my partner who introduced me to live, Michelle. Hey, mom, good to see you from YouTube. And pretty much
Awesome.
Dave, Majida, thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer, for accepting my invite on such a short notice. I know you're pretty much busy, and I also know that you're about to take a break. So it's a pleasure to have you with me and talk about a topic that is very close to me, which is workplace culture and also understanding how to identify and overcome toxicity in workplace. So very excited to talk about that.
My favorite topic. Thank you so much for having you. For having me. I am so excited to be here as your first guest on your show. Such an honor.
It's a real pleasure. So just take a quick minute and give us an intro into who you are and how did you come about to be known as Career Bestie.
So how did I become the internet's career bestie? Long and roundabout way, after a plus 10-year career in tech, mostly startups, mostly in leadership, and several years in executive and senior leadership roles, I realized that my passion stopped being for doing the job that I was doing, which was customer success, client enablement. And I realized that the thing that I had really grown to love doing most of all was really helping the people that I was working with develop their talents and prepare to build their own career success, whatever that success looked like for them. So I ended up leaving corporate, which was kind of always my plan. I just stayed a little bit longer than I thought I would. And I started my business. And one of the main first things I did when I realized exactly what I wanted this business to be and who I wanted to help was I started a YouTube channel. And I just started filming videos with career advice that I wish that I had when I was 25, 30 years old. And it's grown from there. So I really just have conversations with people as though we're already besties because, hey, we already are. And there's so many different voices and so much advice out there in terms of career strategy when it comes to finding a job and things like that. But where I really saw a gap was how to succeed in the role that you're in, especially when you are facing obstacles at work, when you're dealing with a difficult coworker, when you don't have the greatest boss, or especially in where I really found, a big need and a lot of people started hanging with me was about toxic workplaces. So that was the impetus of my toxic job detox program. And a lot of questions that we have is surrounding toxic jobs, toxic workplaces, what they are, how they come about, how to deal with them, and how to recover when you leave them.
Absolutely. I'm very much impressed by the way the YouTube has grown leaps and bounds for you. And I can't think of a better guest than you to actually discuss about workplace culture because you have gone through the highs and lows, you have come out victorious, and right now you're helping many others just do the same. So, before we begin, I want to understand what do you mean by workplace culture? What does culture really refer to in this sense?
So for me, workplace culture is really the experience that you have working for the company and the values and the ethos that are important to them. So when you go to work on a daily basis, what is the culture going to be? What is your connection to your colleagues? What is your connection to leadership? What is your connection to your customer? And what consistencies are there? So we can have and there's, this runs a huge gamut, and there's a level of maturity in terms of workplace cultures, depending on where you are, how much they have invested in it. But every workplace, whether intentionally or not, has developed a workplace culture. And one thing that you'll find is that if you're ever out of alignment with the workplace culture that you're in, you're not going to be very happy. And where people tend to be happiest, most satisfied, and really thrive is when they find a workplace where the culture really is in alignment with who they are, their value, and their missions, and really supports them in realizing their career vision.
So, what I hear you say is it is about alignment, understanding what workplace means to you both personally and professionally, and finally
Mm-hmm.
bringing in this attunement between your personal life, that is spending time with family, taking time for the activities that you love, and ultimately still being able to deliver your 100% at your job. How true is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think your work-life boundaries really come into play there, because for some people, they want to do 40, 45 hours a week, whatever it is. They want to do their jobs, they want to go home, and that is it. And if there's any expectations above and beyond that, it's not in alignment for them. On the other hand, there's people who just love working and they want to work all the time. Like, give me more hours. And I've been on both sides of that coin. Like, I love what I do, so I have a tendency to do too much of it. It's like, it does get to be like unhealthy. You don't want to be working too much, but it's knowing where that is and what you want your work and your life to look like. And I love how you brought that together, because I think so often we talk about work life as being separate and distinct from personal life, where really, like, we have one life. We're one individual, one human, and there's so many different facets of our lives that need to coexist with each other. So we need to be clear in terms of what we want those different areas to look like. And when one of those areas is, taking too much, is throwing other things out of balance or not leaving space for the other things that are important, and then we need to evaluate if we're willing to make the adjustments to meet those demands, or if we need to find another path so that we are in alignment and our lives do look like the way that we want them to look.
Absolutely. So, what I feel, the real problem is, I think it has got to do with the definition of work-life balance, because most people
Mm-hmm.
think balance means it is to equally divide the time between personal life and
Yeah.
professional life, which
Yeah.
I don't think, honestly, in reality doesn't happen. So, what I feel the balance is all about is to do your job, to give it 100%, but still leave some time to complete the activities that means, very dear to you. So,
Yeah.
coming to that definition, I think it is really important to understand how work life balance has progressed. So, if you could just delve a little bit into how it was in the past. So, let's take the Gen X. So, how was it for them, and how did it change when the Gen Y and the millennials came, and how will it be for the Gen Zs in the future?
Yeah. So I think when we, like, if you don't mind, like, I'll just scale it up to kind of more macro level, because I think this is a lot of the conversations that are happening right now about what does work look like, especially as more people are going back into the office. Should they go back into the office and all of that kind of thing? So when we look at the way that work is structured and how workplaces are structured and how work culture is structured, most of it is based on antiquated ideologies. So for some reason, the first thing that always comes to mind, even though I've never seen the show, is like the 1950s kind of, the man goes off to work and his wife stays at home and takes care of the kids. Or like Mad Men in the 1960s, where it was this very formal thing. There was a very specific way that professionals lived their lives. And there was a very specific person who was a professional in the types of roles that kind of everyone is working in now or trying to. And as we've progressed, so obviously there's been so many different social movements, and I feel like in the past year it's been an accelerator, because one thing that I think that happened with the pandemic is that it forced us to face the things that we didn't like about the world. Because as much as we missed going out into the world, there was things that we did not miss. We did not miss the gossip at the water cooler. We did not miss hour-and-a-half long commutes to get to work every single day. There was a whole bunch of things that working remotely actually removed for us. So I think now we're at this place where, okay, like we know that the old work structure doesn't have to exist for companies to be profitable, for teams and individuals to be productive, and for us to have positive working relationships. We've proven that over the last year and a half, right? But now there's the discourse of how, okay, now that we reassemble, how are we reassembling? So there's the go back to normal. So go back to your office, sit in your cubicle or in your open plan desk, whatever that looks like. There's companies that are doing that, and there's people who absolutely want to do that. Then there's a hybrid model. So you can work remotely sometimes, but we still want you here. Lots of people want to do that too. And then there's why do I have to be in an office? Why can't I just keep on working from my pajamas at home? And a lot of people want to do that. So I think ultimately, as we look at these different conversations that are happening, is that we need to understand that work can happen anywhere. And it's just a matter of finding what works best for you, what suits your life, and how you work best. And that might not be the same every single day. Like for me personally, I actually work better in a hybrid model where I go into an office 1 or 2 days a week because I focus much better in an office where I have to focus through distractions versus where I'm at home and there's not as many distractions other than when my kids are home from school because summertime. So, starting off with that, what do I need, and what is my company, or was it company that I'm considering looking at? And then I think this also intersects with another thing, and I posted a video about this on LinkedIn today, is now we're also talking about labor shortages. And especially in the US and specific industries and specific roles, companies are having an exorbitantly hard time hiring. They cannot get people to fill those roles. But when we look fundamentally at the issue, so a large amount of that is especially like in restaurant, food service, hospitality, where the industry was just decimated and people moved on. They found different roles. They don't want to go back to the instability. They don't want to go back to like low pay, terrible hours and all of those things. Totally understandable. But we also have to look at the issues that are lying underneath that, because it's not an issue of no one wants these jobs. Why don't people want those jobs? And that's a very interesting question. I'd love to hear what people think about that in the comments, because I think that there is a lot of thoughts, but I personally think that the solutions are somewhat simple. And I don't know if I am frozen or if Shreyas is frozen right now. So I'll just keep on talking. Oh no. Okay, so let's see. Taking a look in the comments, so many compliments. Balance will be different for each person. This is absolutely true, in my opinion, at least. So I think, so what I talked about today, and this is where I think we need to talk about the future of work and where it intersects with workplace culture, is that if we look fundamentally at the issues of the industries and the roles that are struggling, is that these were often deemed to be essential workers. They were industries that were severely missed, but they were also industries that have historically been underpaid, undervalued, and not necessarily getting sufficient amounts of respect. And I ultimately think that as we reassemble work, no matter how we are reassembling work, we need to just focus on the fundamentals. Treat people like humans, treat them well, and pay them well. Because if you're not treating people well and you're not valuing people, and one of the ways that people perceive value is by how well they're paid, it is going to be hard to hire people. It is going to be hard to retain people. And that is obviously what no company is going for right now. We want to make sure that we're building like healthy, successful teams. And while average tenure in a job or in a company has been decreasing, we don't want that to go down to you have to rehire your entire teams every 6 months, right? Like that just wouldn't really be a scalable solution, because the cost of hiring is very high and the cost of churn is very high. Are you back?
Yes, I'm back. I apologize. It's monsoon season in India, so it's a bit overcast. So my connection might be a little bit clunky here and there, but I did hear you. So you made a great transition between the culture, the balance, and what we need to do right now. So there were two highlights that I could catch upon. One is to offer that flexibility in the sense not just about the work hours, it's also about choosing where you'd want to work, the hybrid culture. And second, it
Yeah.
is all about happiness. So the more happy your employees are, better is their productivity, better will be the output. So these two things, when you do it right and add the trust, the mutual trust between the employer and the employee, I think that is
Yeah.
where the progress happens, and that is where the labor shortage of labor issues can be resolved, because people are not feeling that they are getting the respect they deserve. All they are being looked at is, to get out that output, and then they are deserted, which I think in the long run will just prove to be detrimental. And just to offer my perspective, the only reason why I bought in the Gen X, Y, and the millennial
Mhm.
perspective is to understand how the perspectives have changed over the years. Because
Yeah.
during the 50s and 60s, we were just out of World War. When I say we, it is the world. So the
Yeah.
primary focus was on just getting, into some sort of work, sustaining the family, providing for them, and at the same time trying to boost innovation, trying to see if there can be any advancements in technology. And as time progressed, so 80s and mid 80s, the technology boomed. So people started using computers, people started inventing machines to make their tasks easier. So now it
Mhm.
was no longer about having to toil 24 past 7 to get something or to get a better output. Now the machines could do half of what you could do in a better time. So
Mhm.
the workload reduced, and people started to look at other sources like other entertainment, traveling. So these things came into picture, and people started to see if there could be a balance. And now
Mhm.
bringing the millennials, like most of the stuff happens over IT. So most of it is
Mhm.
machine made. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot more time that has opened, and the jobs have shrunk because of this innovation in technology. So you find probably there is more people to do the same particular job, which is where the competition kicks in. So because of that, now you're giving that false image where you want to push yourself, to give out probably 150%, 200%, just to ensure that you retain that particular job. And I think that is where this issue of work life imbalance has crept up. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with how technological advances have shaped even the different roles. I think one thing that is important that doesn't get enough discussion right now is that I think, especially right now, there's a lot of fear surrounding automation and machine learning, artificial intelligence, and what implication is that going to have on jobs. And I think that really, like, the future of the workforce is that we don't know what it looks like. And I feel like I sound a little bit like Chelsea, like with her education spiel, but I'm going to borrow it because she's awesome. But, if I even, so when I was in corporate, I was working for the last several years of my career in customer success. If you go back 20 years, customer success pretty much didn't exist. It was a brand new job title in, I think it was 1995. I believe Salesforce was the first company to have it, but it didn't really start to catch on and take off until the rise of SaaS, so software as a service. And because that resided on contracts that customers could cancel at any time if they didn't use the software, they would cancel the software. So all of a sudden, SaaS companies were like, we need a way to fix this and to like keep our customers. So that birthed customer success, which is still one of the fastest growing roles in the tech industry. So if I think about, could we have anticipated that happening as we transition from enterprise install-based software into cloud solutions? No one would have, like, 20 years been like, oh yeah, that's going to be like one of the biggest career opportunities. Like, again, it did not exist. And I think with the shifts and changes that are happening in the workforce, that we could have said the same, like, when cars were invented, like what's going to happen to the pony business? Well, it's going to change, right? So for each level of innovation, there's also like, I don't think that anyone ends up sitting idle. I think that understanding and cultivating skills that are transferable is important. And when you look at the jobs that fundamentally could not be replaced, is humans dealing with humans. That's not going to be replaced at any point in time. So if you are developing soft skills to make yourself better at dealing with other humans, you are going to be able to take those skills and apply them in different ways, in sales, in customer service, client experience, account management, in leadership, in so many different ways. But I definitely understand the fear that exists, especially right now today, where industries are rebounding, and yes, there are jobs that can be filled. It's not necessarily your job that is coming back, at least not at scale. So then it's a matter of, I think we need to be future tracking more and understanding. And I think another thing that even, I know that this is an issue for career changers, is I did this before, but it doesn't apply here. And often you can still map that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us to a little bit more spec, which is identifying toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
How
Oh no, we're losing you again.
behavior either from colleagues or in the organization.
Okay, you're breaking out. So I heard part of the question.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes. Hopefully it holds up. Oh no. This is the fun thing about putting yourself live on the internet. You never know what's going to happen. Yes, Tiffany, the calming blue light.
Well, I
So
can
I
hear you
think that
sort
you're
of. I
at,
don't know if I'm coming.
I can hear you right now.
Am I coming in?
Yes. Ask the question
Okay.
really fast.
So I was just, trying to,
Mm-hmm.
in the work culture, if it is prevalent in the work culture, or, when a colleague is toxic, so how do we identify it and how to overcome it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a video over on YouTube, and it's, I think, 14 signs of a toxic workplace. And I have one that's like the 5 critical signs. And really, like, I can list off probably 40 different behaviors and signals that you could watch for in order to determine if a workplace is toxic. So I think that there's a few things that really come into play in a toxic workplace that are the hallmarks of it. It doesn't mean that the workplace is definitively toxic. This is not like a diagnostic tool, and I'm going to get to the reason why for that in just a minute. But what is prevalent in toxic workplaces is that there is undermining, there is sabotage, there is malicious gossip, taking credit for other people's work, there is unfair criticism, open criticism, especially by boss to their direct reports, where coworkers are throwing you under buses. These are things that we often see in toxic work environments. Plus, we look at the way that even people deal with each other. So what is the level of respect? How do people communicate? Is communication being withheld? Is it transparent, open, or is it a closed system? How is information distributed? So what are the means? Like, is it accessible to everyone? We look at all sorts of things with this. Ultimately, for a toxic work environment, is it comes down to a fundamental question. And this is why I can't give you a diagnostic tool that, like, if you check 5 out of 10, it's toxic. Is that ultimately, if that workplace is toxic for you, if it is having a detrimental effect on your well-being, your psychological health, your emotional health, your sense of safety, it is toxic. Another thing that we also see, and actually to loop back to a point that you brought up earlier, is also they tend to be low trust environments. So you don't feel like you can trust other people and people don't trust you. But ultimately that might be fine for you. It ends up being a personal perspective and a personal experience, which is why it's hard to nail it down. However, there is research coming out that has found that 99% of adults have had a toxic work environment or have had a toxic work experience in their careers, which is like a huge statistic. So it's a very wide scale problem that we don't talk enough about. And I think especially we don't talk about the severity and the implications of what happens after you leave the toxic workplace and how this actually impacts people. I think often it's conflated with like a bad job or a bad work culture. And while a bad work culture can be toxic, a bad work culture does not mean that it's toxic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. So that is where,
We're losing you again. I bet that Shreyas right now is like has the like most insightful thought and the internet is just completely disagreeing. Okay, we can see you right now. We can hear you right now. I can hear clicking. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Cannot hear me. All right. Yes, Enrique, we have to love technology. It's so, we cannot trust it, can we? See, this is why the robots can't take over, because this is what's going to happen with all of the things if the robots take over. And Tiffany, I love your point. So that's such an insightful thought, Jen. The fact that you shared that just because a culture is bad doesn't mean that it is toxic. Totally, like this is something that I think like when you look at general articles, like if you go to like just Google toxic work environment and look at the big publications. And I think that a lot of the discussion is really just centered on bad work environments. And I think a lot of the advice has been given by people who are like, oh yeah, like it's toxic, it's like bad, but it's like, no, you don't know what toxic is until you've been through it. And if you're not trauma informed, then you shouldn't really be giving advice and expertise that you don't have on the situation. Because what ends up happening is that I've seen the worst advice that I saw about a toxic work environment, and specifically how to recover from a toxic work environment, was to blame yourself for it. So it was just like, yeah, figure out what you did wrong there. And that is the most horrible thing, because if we think about work cultures, leadership principles that are, prevalent across an organization, you don't have full control of that as an employee. You have control of you, but you don't have control of everyone else. So are there things that you can do to mitigate a bad work situation? Absolutely. Can you inflame a bad work situation? Absolutely. I would even venture to say that I have seen where people have picked up toxic patterns and restaged toxic work environments for themselves, like unknowingly. However, I don't think that the best place for us to look, especially if someone is in a toxic work environment and is experienced or has experienced that trauma in the workplace, that we should be like telling them to like turn fingers and blame themselves. Now, if it's a negative work situation, I think like the depth of the impact isn't as bad, so that the advice is very different. But we do need to make sure that we are separating those two things, because they are two very separate issues. Where a bad job, maybe you can just shake it off. Like getting away from that boss who's kind of a jerk might not be that big of a deal. Whereas, getting over your interactions with a toxic boss who, maybe has underlying narcissism and things like that are very, very different.
so who do you actually reach out to first, when you start feeling that you might be in a toxic work culture or that your colleague might exhibit toxic behavior? So who do you reach
Yeah.
out first in that
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah. So if you're dealing with a difficult coworker and you think that they're a toxic coworker, from a coworker perspective, I don't think it's always a deal breaker. I think that if it's all of your coworkers, different situation. But if it's one individual, then it's a matter of, can you minimize your interactions with them? Can you keep your interactions with them in public forums? So avoid having one-on-one meetings, one-on-one, email exchanges and things like that. Just start looping more people in when possible, so that if they are trying to take credit for your work, if they are trying to, hold you accountable for their mistakes and stuff like that, that there is going to be witnesses for it. It is going to safeguard against that behavior. So really what you're trying to do with a toxic coworker is to contain and mitigate. However, if it's a full-scale toxic work environment, it's not just a coworker, it's your boss, it's all of your coworkers, it's the whole company, the whole organization. Then what you need to do is determine, like, is this something that is actually toxic for me? So, ultimately, like, when it comes down to it is, if you feel like you are losing confidence, if it is the only thing that you can think, talk about, or consider, like I've talked about my experience when I was in a toxic job. I had my nightly rant session to my husband. So instead of coming home and having a casual catch up while I made dinner, I was just like complaining about the world. I didn't want solutions. I was just complaining. It was all that I had the capacity to do. I was just so frustrated and so agitated at the end of every single day. So you have to look at, like, is this something that is impacting other areas of my life? Is this impacting my relationship with my partner? Is this the only thing that I'm talking to my parents or my friends about? Am I driving them a little bit nuts? Are you losing sleep? Are you having any health impacts? Like, I ended up hospitalized at one point when I was in a toxic work situation because the stress became very large. And this is something that I've heard from other people as well. Not necessarily hospitalization, but definitely health payoff, like health impacts too. And then if you feel like the answer to that question is like, yes, this is toxic and this is hurting me, then it's like, you can't change. Don't swim against the current. Even if your instinct to swim against the current, which so many of us do, we need to identify, like, so I talk about from toxic job recovery is that there is this process to toxic job recovery. And the first thing where a lot of people live, especially in a toxic work environment, is denial. So we tend to rationalize more when we're in a toxic work environment. So even when you have those moments of enlightening of saying, maybe this is toxic, I don't think that this is normal, we will, like, our brains, like, cognitive dissonance is so strong that it's like, oh, like, it's going to get better. It's not that bad. It's just me. Like, they didn't mean it that way. We sit and we wait and kind of make all of these excuses about why it's not so bad. So we sit in denial, but then at some point we come to awareness. And it's like, okay, no, it's actually that bad. It's not going to get better. It's not me, it's them. And then what I often see happen is that people enter what I call the toxic loop. So that's where when we reach that awareness step, it becomes very hard to exit the situation. Our brain loves patterns. Our brains don't like to change. No matter how much we want to change and how miserable it is, we love predictability. So what we find is sometimes people in that situation cycle back into denial. And it's like we go back to rationalizing and excusing the experience and undermining our own experience. Gaslighting is a very common quality in a toxic work environment, and we end up gaslighting ourselves in the situation. Where we want people to get, though, is when they get to that point of awareness, is that we want them to get to the point where they can separate. You cannot change a toxic work environment. The only effective solution to a toxic work environment is to leave the toxic work environment. If you're in a big corporation, maybe there's the opportunity to switch teams, switch to a different manager. You might be able to change the actual circumstance, because I think especially like when we're not talking about a little tiny company, we're not talking about like the whole company being toxic. We're probably talking about a piece of it having those qualities. Now, if it is at scale, you can't switch teams, you can't get away from the manager, it's all of the managers, then it's a matter of devising an exit strategy and finding a place that isn't toxic. This is very daunting to a lot of toxic workplace escapees, because there's a lot of fear of, I'm going to end up in another place like this. All companies are like this. So we need to resolve that. And that's where, when you're ready to break that loop and exit that toxic job cycle, you need to get into releasing so that you can move into toxic job recovery.
So you made a great point once again, which is, when anybody goes through this toxic workplace culture, or have a colleague who exhibits toxic behavior, I think the first thing that gets impacted is confidence. So how do you claim back that confidence and become the awesome person you are once again?
Yeah. So this is a process, and especially for people who have exited a toxic workplace, if you're in it, if you've recently left it, this is not like, I wish I could wave a magical wand, give you 3 steps, you would bang, 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 do them, and okay, I'm great, I'm fine now. This is going to be a process. So I just want expectations set right there, because I think that a lot of people want, like, we want immediate results, especially when you're coming out of it. It doesn't feel good to feel that way coming out. For me, again, it starts with, like, if we look at how the impacts of a toxic workplace happened, it's because there was negative inputs and you were in this negative environment. So you were probably not getting constructive criticism. You were probably getting unfair, malicious criticism. You weren't in trusting relationships with your coworkers. There's all of these kind of negative things and negative thought patterns that happen. We first have to find where those habits and where those behaviors are. That's really important, because if you don't identify where they are, especially the ones that are really big blockers and are really, like, impacting you, they're going to keep on getting in your way, and you're going to find yourself back in that toxic loop. I think once you've done that, then you have to start to move into, okay, I've looked at outside to give myself some context and understand what just happened. Now it's time to go inside, because when you are able to rebuild confidence internally, it is going to be much steadier, and it is going to be much more meaningful in future situations. So I'm not saying that this makes you impervious. I'm a person who naturally derives more confidence internally than externally, but it is going to, it's going to make you more resilient. So this takes, one thing that I always talk about is knowing your unique awesomeness quotient, your UAQ. And I think that this is important, because when you leave a toxic work environment, you've probably been told that you're not great at your job and you're probably low on self-belief. So realizing how much value that you bring to the team, or to a team and to an organization, and the impacts that you can have is very important. Just having baseline awareness in that, even if you haven't fully internalized it, is going to help. Visit that all the time. Then I think you need to get into, like, getting clarity in terms of what you really want. What you want for your career to look like, what you want for, the work culture to look like, what is important, knowing what your vision is, knowing what your mission is, knowing what your values are, so that you can choose aligned employers and choose aligned workplace cultures is really important. And this is where you can start to take your power back as well, because instead of just going and looking for any job, now you are choosing them, because you have evaluation criteria. It's not just a matter of, I hope someone picks me and offers me a job. It's like, okay, is this the actual job that I want, and that I'm going to be able to add value and make a huge impact, that this is going to work for both of us. And then I honestly, like, there is a certain amount of just, like, requiring patience, because these things take practice. You can't just identify your UAQ. You can't just write out your values and, like, okay, that's it. Like, it takes, I like to incorporate daily success habits into it. So things like a gratitude practice, regularly taking inventory of the great things that you are doing, or the great things that you have done, revisiting those. And also finding ways to rebuild things like trust in relationships, and reestablish positive, like, fully leveraging positive bonds that you have, but also building new positive bonds as well, is something that can be very transformative, because when those are lacking, it hurts. Like, humans need human connection. Like, as cave people, we required it, and our primitive brains still really crave it. So the more that you can focus on those, it will start to cultivate. And the more that you focus on doing those practices on a regular basis, and focusing on those things, like, that have, like, strong social connection, but also the connection with yourself, is going to help you reestablish confidence after leaving a toxic workplace.
Those are really great points, and I definitely love the UAQ. And I highly recommend everyone to look up Jennifer's profile and take a look and go through the UAQs, because one thing that I really resonated with was when you put up a post, sharing about what tips you found on the internet. And I would definitely like to reiterate that point over here, because internet is always not the best place to find out what works or what tips are in favor of you. Because if you go and see Jennifer's post, you will understand that some of the tips offered and that on the top of the Google search results are definitely
Yeah.
ridiculous, and it definitely will ruin you and will push you further down rather than uplifting you. So please do reach out to either Jennifer or whoever you feel resonates with the same band level as you are. Have a confidence to, take out some time, have that communication going on, reach out to people. I think that is the best way, you can start wanting that
Yeah.
confidence back. So
Yeah.
the last 40 minutes have been really insightful with some tech fun. So without delaying the inevitable because it's starting to rain. So I just want to ask if there are any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers today.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you, everyone. I couldn't even keep up with the chat. You guys kept it moving, and I'm so excited to see so many friends here today. You guys are like the best. Congratulations on your first live. This is so much like so awesome. I think really like as we think about future of work, think about the future of yourself and who you really want to be. And don't be afraid to unapologetically and ambitiously pursue that version of yourself with intention and awareness. Find people who support and uplift you through friends. Like I talk about Success Squad. That can be your friends, it can be your family, working with coaches, taking classes. There's so many different ways to become the person that you really want to be, and to like find the people that you trust. Find the people that are giving you advice, like someone right here. Which way am I pointing? Right here. So, but when you find someone who is giving you value and giving you advice that aligns, when you're looking to do more of that thing, don't be afraid to, find good partners to work with, um, and to invest in yourself to make that happen. Sometimes that is time, sometimes that is money, and sometimes it is energy, and sometimes it's all three. We all like no one gets there by themselves. Like success is never solitary. So make sure to don't feel like you have to do it on your own. There are resources and there are people to support you in your life and beyond.
Those are some really great tips, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, jumping on live with a rookie like me, putting up with tech issues, holding the show while I had some problems here and there. And
I You did great. I lose my mind when I have internet issues while streaming. It is so. A few weeks ago, I had a live with a friend. Actually, it was a couple months ago. But my internet like completely died, kicked me out of the live stream. Like I had no internet, and she's not a live streamer, so she was just there like, okay. I felt
no,
so
that,
bad, so I know how it is as a host.
no, that is why, like when I said, you were a great guest to begin with, I was not lying because this was exactly what, I knew would happen. Because monsoon, once the sky is overcast, I know my internet will just give up on me. So I'm really fortunate, to have had you as my first guest to make this life a little bit more lively, more informative. And I know you have a very busy schedule, so it makes it even more special that you took out almost an hour of your time to
Oh,
join
of
me,
course.
and also our lovely community from LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Most of them I recognize: Tiffany, Jackie, Enrique,
Yes.
Joe, Michelle, Majida. Thank you so much for joining me and giving me the encouragement to, unapologetically be me, because I can get a bit nervous sometimes when I'm doing live because I usually like to think slow, collect my thoughts, and then talk with the person. But this one has been a real game changer. So I think I'll do more lives and it will be the same as what we have had today. So thank you very much for joining and hope you all have a great week ahead. And I'll be joining you on episode 2 very soon with one more great guest lined up. So stay tuned, watch the space. Please follow Jennifer, follow her YouTube channel if you haven't. That is a storehouse of great knowledge. All things related to toxic workplace culture, work life balance. You will definitely find what you're looking. So, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Ciao for now.